Hey guys, Valaros here with the first look at the new champion K'Sante's Jungle Clear. First I'm going to give a very quick ability rundown so you guys know what you're actually looking at, but if you already know what his kit does, then you can go ahead and skip to the marked timestamps down below. K'Sante's passive is pretty straightforward. If you hit an enemy with an ability, they become marked. If you auto-attack them, it procs the mark for some bonus damage. K'Sante's Q is his bread and butter ability. It's just like Yone Q and Yasuo Q. Very low cooldown, linear skill shot, very short, but if you get 2 stacks on it, your third Q becomes empowered, much longer range, and knocks enemies into you. K'Sante's W is kind of like Aurelia W. You're unstoppable, you have damage reduction while charging, and then you charge in a target direction. If you hit a target, they get knocked back and stunned. K'Sante's E is a very short dash that gives him a shield, but if you cast it on an ally, it becomes much longer and you shield your ally as well. So if you're going to jungle K'Sante, he really benefits from having some melee lanes. Otherwise, his mobility is completely non-existent. You'll run at the enemy, they'll run the other way. But if, for example, you have a Jax that can just jump on the enemy laner, then you can simply EQ to your Jax like this. Right? So he's kind of like Sejuani. He really wants to have some melee lanes that can go in for him. K'Sante R will knock back an enemy champion and follow them. If you knock them over a wall, then he'll follow them over the wall as well, like this. Okay? He'll also enter 20 seconds of Berserking, where he loses a lot of HP, armor, and MR in return for AD and Omnivamp. All of his abilities will also be empowered. Okay? His passive will be empowered to scale off armor and MR and also deal some true damage. His Q loses the slow, but its cooldown is reduced by 1 second flat. Okay, so you really get to spam your Q out, proc a lot of marks for your passive, and stack up your third Q very rapidly. Okay? K'Sante's W, it'll charge up much more quickly, the dash will be much faster, but it no longer knocks targets back. K'Sante's E will now go over walls, short walls mind you. Okay, it's still going to be a relatively short dash, but it can go over smaller walls now. So if I show this again, auto refresh, let me proc my ulti, and you can go over walls like this, okay? You can't go over any of the larger walls though, it's still quite a short dash. Now, other details that are relevant for clearing. K'Sante's Q, when you're not in your ultimate, has a partial auto reset, okay? So if I auto Q auto here when my ult is down, you can see I get a sort of reset, but it's not very quick. When you are in your R form, you get a full reset. So if I auto Q auto now, you can see that auto was very quick, right? K'Sante's W, when you're clearing, you generally speaking just want to auto and then use your W, so you're charging it when your auto attack is on cooldown, right? And then your E you don't really use while clearing in the early levels because you go QWQ if you're full clearing, but later on you just use it as a small dash and shield. Outside of that, important things to note. K'Sante's Q, the cooldown scales off your bonus armor and MR, not your ability haste, and the cast time is reduced by bonus HP. So this champion build's pretty tanky. His Q's very low cooldown, so I think his main itemization is probably going to look something like Sunderer or Iceborne Gauntlet, right? One of the Sheen items, and then tank items that don't have much CDR on them. So for example, Dead Man's Plate, Force of Nature, especially because they give him some extra mobility, and then maybe something like a Sterax because he does scale off AD and HP as well. Alright, now for the clear. K'Sante's clear is pretty straightforward. You basically just spam auto Q auto non-stop. The big thing to keep in mind is that every third Q is going to fling monsters over your shoulder, so you want to position so that you're flinging the monster towards your next location. You also want to make sure you don't pull monsters too far too quickly, otherwise your fling is going to throw them outside of the patience radius, which is much smaller now. Open on Krugs with an auto Q auto into W auto. The big thing to remember here is that in Season 13, the big Krug no longer splits into 2 medium Krugs. It immediately splits into 4 small Krugs. This means we can actually kite the big Krug outside of patience radius, because as soon as it splits, we can just finish off all the little Krugs at once with a Q. Open on Raptors with an auto Q, and then position behind the Raptor camp so you can W through them. When you W, make sure you W to an open spot, not into the wall. Otherwise, you're going to creep block yourself onto the wall with all of the little Raptors being grouped up. It sucks a lot. When you open on Wolves, if you're going to full clear, make sure you take a second point in Q. You just spam auto Q autos just like before, but make sure you position between the Wolves and the blue buff. This way you can fling the Wolves into the blue and then finish them off with an auto Q auto as you go. You do have the option of going Wolves into Gromp here, because you can no longer double camp the blue and Gromp. Here I'll just show a straightforward blue into Gromp, but just remember, if you go on Gromp into blue, you'll have a better respawn timer on your Gromp, and you can kite the blue further up into river than the Gromp, alright? Especially because Scuttle Crab spawns at 330 now, rather than 315, it's actually okay to be a little bit slower on your clear, unless you need to rush over to gank a lane right away. Either way, just finish off the Gromp or the blue with auto Q auto. You can actually consider saving your W for if there's going to be a Scuttle Crab fight here. Thanks for watching. A quick reminder that I do coach over at Nice.gg if you want to check that out. The link is in the video description below. As always, a big thank you to my patrons for helping to make this channel possible.